Good morning. Welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we'll be reading Deuteronomy chapter 5. And Moses called all Israel, and said unto them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them, and keep and do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us here alive this day. The Lord talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. I stood between the Lord and you at that time to shew you the word of the Lord, for ye were afraid by reason of the fire, and went not up into the mount, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and shewing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out of thence through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, neither shalt thou commit adultery, neither shalt thou steal, neither shalt thou bear false witness against thy neighbor. Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's house, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's. These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness with a great voice. And he added no more. And he wrote them in 2 tables of stone, and delivered them unto me. And it came to pass, when ye heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that ye came near unto me, even all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And ye said, Behold, the Lord our God hath shewed us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that God doth talk with man, and he liveth. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any more, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that hath heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as we have, and lived? Go thou near, and hear all that the Lord our God shall say, and speak thou unto us all that the Lord our God shall speak unto thee, and we will hear it, and do it. And the Lord heard the voice of your words when ye spake unto me. And the Lord said unto me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken unto thee. They have well said all that they have spoken. Oh, that there were such an heart in them, that they would fear me, and keep all my commandments always, that it might be well with them, and with their children forever. Go say to them, Get you into your tents again. But as for thee, stand thou here by me, and I will speak unto thee all the commandments, and the statutes, and the judgments, which thou shalt teach them, that they may do them in the land which I give them to possess it. Ye shall observe to do therefore as the Lord your God hath commanded you. Ye shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. Ye shall walk in all the ways which the Lord your God hath commanded you, that ye may live, and that it may be well with you, and that ye may prolong your days in the land which ye shall possess. Summarizing Deuteronomy chapter 5. Moses is continuing his speech addressing the second generation of Israel out of Egypt. He began this speech in Deuteronomy chapter 1. This current population of Israel is preparing to take the promised land, In Numbers chapter 31, God tells Moses that he's going to die and he's not going to go with Israel. So it's from this perspective that Moses is speaking to Israel. Verses 1 through 5. Moses tells Israel that he's about to give them laws, statutes, or judgments. He reminds Israel of Exodus 19, where God makes a covenant with them on Mount Horeb. In verse 3, Moses reminds this population that they were, in fact, present at Mount Horeb in Exodus 19. This current generation is the second out of Egypt. So in Numbers chapter 14, God, or the Bible confirms that God told them that the population that is 20 years old and up are going to die in the wilderness and they're not going to inherit the land. So now that we're in Deuteronomy chapter 5, this is the generation that has survived that. And Moses is making it clear that I understand that this is the second generation, but this happened during this time in Exodus, so you were definitely here during this time. Verse 5, Moses reminds Israel that he stood between them and God because in Exodus chapter 19, verses 16 through 19, God manifests on Mount Horeb through a trumpet-like voice, through cloud, fire, and Israel was unnerved by this. Verse 6, Moses communicates what God said to Israel. And God said, I'm your God. I brought you out of Egypt, out of bondage. In verse 7, this begins the 10 Commandments. Commandment 1, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Commandment 2, thou shalt not make any graven image or likeness of anything in heaven, earth, or the sea, or the earth below. Don't bow down to them or serve them. God is a jealous God. Iniquity will visit third and fourth generations of people that hate him, but he is merciful to those that keep his commands. Commandment 3, don't take God's name in vain. He will not hold that person guiltless. Commandment 4, keep the Sabbath holy. You can work 6 days. And this verse lists visitors, servants, animals. No one can work on the Sabbath. Commandment 5, honor your parents so you'll have a long life and an easier time in the promised land. Commandment 6, thou shalt not kill. Commandment 7, neither shalt thou commit adultery. Commandment 8, neither shalt thou steal. Commandment 9, do not bear false witness or testimony. Commandment 10, do not desire anything that your neighbor has. In verse 22, Moses tells Israel that this is what God said by voice in the midst of fire, cloud, and darkness, but he didn't add anything else. And then he tells Israel that God wrote these commandments on 2 tablets of stone. In verses 23 through 27, Moses recalls that Israel came closer. So Moses is standing in between God, who is on the mountain, and Israel, who has stood back because they are freaked out at how God is manifesting on this mountain. So after God gives the commandments, Israel feels, I guess, more comfortable, and they close that gap in between them and Moses, and they, stand with Moses close to God, and they confirm that they witnessed God's manifestation. Then verses 28 through 29, God heard Israel and was pleased with this response. Verses 30 through 33, God tells Moses to tell Israel to get back into their tents, but told Moses to stay so that God can give him additional commands And God emphasizes at the end of this chapter that Moses needs to obey God so that he can live a long life and that he can go into the promised land. So even though we know now at this point in Deuteronomy 5, we know that Moses isn't going into the promised land, Moses is telling Israel about what happened back in Exodus. And so in the book of Exodus, before he disobeyed God, God was saying, well, in order for you to go into the promised land, you're going to need to do this. So it was still open. There was still an opportunity for him to go to the promised land in the book of Exodus. So that's what he's communicating. Highlights. The first 4 commandments are it's denoting how we are supposed to feel about God, the attitude or the disposition we're supposed to take. So look at we start at verse 7. You shall have no other gods before me. Don't create any image, any graven image or any likeness. And I mentioned this with Genesis chapter 'I apologize, just one moment. I thought it was Genesis chapter 35. Okay. Well, it is in the book of Genesis. I should have written this down before now, but I didn't. But the point that I'm trying to make is when we look at these different translations, you'll see that image and idol is something that is interchangeable. We see in the Christian Standard, it says, do not make an idol. The New Living Translation, don't make an idol. But when we look here at the King James, it says an image. In the book of Genesis, the story that I was talking about with Rachel was a character in the Bible, and when she was leaving her home, her father's home with her husband, she took some sort of item. And when the item was mentioned with Rachel, it was referred to as idol or image when it was referring to Rachel. But when her father was mentioned in the same sentence with these items, he called them gods. It was called a gods. So the point that I was just trying to make there is these graven images. We're not supposed to be creating things, or Israel. God commanded Israel to not create any images. And he even goes on to say, I'm a jealous God, the iniquity, which iniquity means evil, gross injustice, wickedness. So that will visit for doing this, for creating images that creating images with the intent of giving it reverence in the way that you should be giving God reverence, it will cause iniquity or sin to be visited to the third and fourth generation of Israel. Also, we see that hating, this is considered like hating God, or hating God is mentioned with this. So being disloyal to God, not obeying this command right here, is this hating God is being mentioned with this. It's not my job to put it together completely, because the thing is, if God didn't say something specifically, I don't want to put that connection together. I just want to highlight what this information is saying and how it's presented. Because you see, he's starting to talk about images. Don't create an image. And if you create an image with the intent of making it something about reverence, these are the things that are listed: iniquity for third and fourth generations. And we're now dealing with hating God, or this may be an act of being seen as hating God. The third command: don't take God's name in vain. The fourth command: keep the Sabbath holy. The second highlight I'd like to make: when we look at keep the Sabbath holy, do you see how much text is after this to define and to really, uh, really make it clear that the Sabbath is holy? And it lists no person, no servant, no animal, no stranger is to work. The last thing I want to point out is verse 20, bearing false witness. Now, at first, I thought that this was lying, but the reason why I don't think this means lie anymore, even though it does mean lie, I think this is more about, or I want to be clear, I think this is more about in a situation where honesty is needed, sort of like court or a matter like that, where there's a governing body involved. In that situation, tell the truth and don't make up lies. The reason why is because when we look at these terms, the way that this, because testimony or witness is in the this version that we just read, but testimony is the word that's used in the King James version. Let's see, made orally by witness under oath. Also, this would make sense why putting your hand on the Bible when you go to court would make sense, because it's reminding us to not bear false witness. And so that's all I have for Deuteronomy chapter 5. The next upload will be Deuteronomy chapter 6. Thank you so much for clicking on the video. Have a wonderful day.